Ireland and the UK. They have the MWLUG, UK lug. There's some in the Netherlands and Germany. We're like, wow, we should do something like that. But independently, we came up with that, and just so happened that Lotusphere was sitting at the same table together. I'm like, well, you're in Chicago, I'm in Cleveland. Why don't we, do this together instead of having one person run it all? And when you work separately, the work is a little more difficult. When you get together, it's a little easier. Back in my day, they called that collaboration. Now I think they call it social. But anyways, again, welcome to Milwaukee. In addition to our normal application development and administration tracks, you should see we also have a social track. So if you're wondering what all this stuff is all about, get in that. You'll find actual business cases of people actually doing this social thing, integrating it with Lotus products and not and things like that. It's also very important to realize that without these people on the outside edges of the ballroom here, our sponsors, we really wouldn't be here. So I'd like to have you all give them a nice hand for helping us out. And then it also couldn't go off without a large group of volunteers, which all come from the Lotus user groups across the Midwest. So a lot of free work goes into stuff like this. I want to thank you again for coming. And Richard, you got it?
Well, thanks for everyone coming. My name is Richard Moy. I'm from Ford Group, and if you get a chance, stop by our booth. Thanks for coming, and this is the third annual one, and we have a lot of things planned today. Besides the sessions, we also have an evening event at the Comedy Sports Club, which is near downtown Milwaukee, I believe. The bus will take us there, so if you're interested in going, you can make it. Please come. It includes dinner and actually a comedy show, and then we would have a lot of fun from what we had last year. It'll be even more fun. We have some other things planned. So one of the things, is that as part of our group, we came with the outreach program, and one of the beneficiaries this year is the Feeding America, and we actually raised $1,000 for Feeding America. So we would want to be not just part of the Lotus community, but also the community that we are involved in, which is around the Great Lakes area. Logistics, I think we're leaving around 6 o'clock, and I think the buses will be here in our ballroom. So we don't want to repeat what happened yesterday, where some of the people were waiting in the lobby for the tour, and then others were waiting here, and then we missed some people and when we hit them. So that's about it. We have a very full day today. Our opening session speaker is David Cohn from LinkedIn. And we can get started in a few minutes. And I just want to thank Vernon IT for donating money for our Feeding America for the outreach program. It was very nice of them. And we start with David, and then David Vai, who many of you guys know. And then we will also have a game from group during about 15 minutes before we actually start the general sessions. Thank you.
When Bernie called me and asked me to speak to you today, I was really excited. He told me about the Lotus user group, and it immediately brought back a memory for me. My first job out of college, I used Lotus Notes as my email program, and I thought about it. That was my introduction to email, and since then, things have changed a little bit, haven't they? We've come quite a long way since those very early days. We're going to be talking about a few things. That's me, and I'm a little compressed there, so I apologize for the people in the back who have a hard time seeing. We're going to talk about three things, and it all revolves around kind of what's been happening in the world. One is this idea of context, and how important context has become in an online universe where there is so much information out there. The second is data. And of course, with the masses of data that are being produced in the world, how do we get to the right data very quickly? And then the third is what we call social graph. How do you make sense of the things, of the relationships that you have to make those relationships work for you, as opposed to just going out and building relationships? As we know, Facebook has really taken off as a place to grab a lot of friends and become social with people that you don't know. That's nice and that's interesting, and we think that that's really important in the world. But we also believe that you should be getting something from those relationships. And so those are the three things that we're going to be talking about: context, data, and relationships. So let's take a step back to 2009, way back in the day. Mark Hurd, the CEO of HP, said, "More data will be created in the next 4 years than in the history of the planet." You guys believe that? Yeah? Doesn't seem unreasonable, does it? Well, let's see what the trends actually look like. That's a lot of data. That's what data looks like to a bunch of Silicon Valley people. Well, we know that back in 1999, these were the big name players out there. AOL had a $90 billion market cap. What's Facebook right now? About $100 billion? That was the player, a little more than 10 years ago. You can see Yahoo was up there. And then some of the secondary players, names that have become more commonplace in the world right now: eBay, Amazon, those were your kind of next tier 2 organizations. So it's amazing how much the online world has changed in such a short amount of time. No surprise there. Between 1995 and 1999, and if you'll recall, in 1995, when Al Gore invented the internet, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff going on in the world, data-wise. There were about 20 million indexed pages of content globally, across the entire World Wide Web. Within 5 years, that number had grown by 10x to about 200 million online pages indexed. So all of a sudden, we see this mad blast of information that's out there. And what did that do? Well, that created the need for search engines, because you didn't know where to go. You didn't know what to find. And Google pops up as this amazing place that helps organize the world of information. And we all know what has happened to Google since then. What's interesting, though, is when you think about how this industry has developed, that of search. Back in the day, 2001, that was a $500 million industry. Within just a few years later, it became a $10 billion industry. This is online paid search. Google owning the vast majority of this revenue. And why is that? It's because there's so much more data that's being created, and marketers understand that they need to get the word out to the right people very quickly. Targeting has to do with search, not to do with traditional advertising. And so there's a mushrooming business for you right there. As time goes on, masses and masses of more data are built. Anybody have any idea how many servers Google has globally? They have over 1 million servers. They are storing tremendous amounts of data. Now the problem is that all of this data is becoming more difficult to search, right? If you've used Google lately, you know that finding something aside from a company or an individual, and even an individual in some cases is hard to find. But the data that's out there in the world right now is really hard to find, and it's very difficult to organize. So I did a search just out of curiosity. I wanted to see what the population of China was. And Google told me in the second pop-up, or the second search result, that there's about 1.3 billion people in China. Sounds about right. What was interesting to me is that there were 6.4 million search results that wanted to tell me how many people lived in China. There are almost as many search results for the population of China as there are people in China. This is basic data, so it's not really that interesting. You know, this is easy to categorize information, not rocket science. What's the population of China? The problem is that when you start looking for things like, what Chinese restaurant would you recommend for me? Google has no idea what I'm asking. The problem is that I live in the city of Chicago, and so how do you even know where to begin answering this question? How do you organize the world of information in a way that helps me figure out where to go for Chinese food? In Chicago, there are two places that I love. One is called Dee's Chinese Restaurant. It's a great kind of higher-end Chinese restaurant. There's another place that's down the street from me that my wife and I order from all the time. It's called Takey Howdy. I'm not kidding. The difference between the two is tremendous, right? One's like $20 entree. The other is like $5 for soup and salad and, egg rolls and all that stuff comes together. How do you even know what I'm looking for? That's the problem. It's not context sensitive. It doesn't know what I want. And I thought this was kind of cool, by the way. See this one, the Lotus Chinese restaurant? Pretty cool. That, by the way, not planned. It just happened to happen that way. So as I'm trying to figure out where to go for Chinese food, the internet needs to understand who I am, what's important to me. And it's not something that can happen without more context. So the advent of social media. Between 1999 and 2005, anybody remember MySpace? Friendster? Still around? Interesting. There's a lot of content that's being created. About 40x from 1999 to 2005 in terms of content. Google is outmatched as far as complex searches. And so social media, which is responsible for so much of this data now, is going to play a larger and larger role in helping you to find what you're looking for. Anybody remember this person? Susan Boyle. Love that voice. Susan Boyle's introduction to the world has been seen 94 million times on YouTube alone. This is the kind of data and online experience that we're talking about. All of a sudden, there's a tremendous amount of information that's out there. People are searching for very specific things. They're seeing a lot of content in various places, and therefore, more and more people want to put more content like this up. They want the notoriety. They want to get the word out. They're interested in being seen and being discovered, and therefore, they spend a lot of time adding content to the internet. On a daily basis, YouTube has 24 hours of video. Sorry, that's per minute. 24 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube every minute. 200 million blogs exist today. There are 50 million tweets per day. And Facebook content shares are now over 1 billion a day. Think about all this content, all this data that's out there. And so what's this doing, ultimately? It's putting us into a whole new category of data information. So Mr. Hurd from HP wasn't off. Actually, he was well short of what's actually going on. The amount of data that's out there is incredible, and finding what you're looking for is becoming increasingly difficult. But social media is going to change how that works. It's going to change what's possible. And so when we get into the social web, talk a little bit about kind of what's out there. And this gets into the premise of context. So when you think a little bit about context, what is context? Context is, what am I thinking about right now? What's important to me at the moment? Who am I hanging out with? What types of conversations am I having? Context is very, very important to us. We don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it. But different contexts require different mental states, different conversations, and mixing and matching different conversations in different places with different people, it's hard to do. And so we know that there's a lot of room for a number of players in this space. Just take the big three, for example, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. The analogy that I'll use for this one, I think, is it's my favorite analogy about talking about the social web. Facebook is kind of like the backyard barbecue. It's the place where you hang out with friends and family, play games, share photos. Any Farmville people out there? Angry Birds? That always gets them out. Yeah, Angry Birds is a blast. How about poking? Anybody know what that is?
Yeah.
I don't, so explain it to me.